They fired me like I didn't matter. 1 minute, I was the woman who rebuilt their crumbling operations, negotiated their biggest deals, and pulled their legacy brand back from the edge. The next, I was sitting in a boardroom, watching my husband and his sister, people I once trusted, sign me out of the very company I helped build. No warning. No gratitude. Just silence. But they made one mistake. They forgot I never needed their name. I was the reason it had weight. What followed wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I found the contract they didn't bother to read. I froze the assets they assumed were theirs. I watched the empire shake because they didn't think I'd fight back. And then? I didn't just return. I rebuilt it from the ground up, on my terms. This is the story of how I went from discarded to unstoppable. How power shifted quietly, from the corner they tried to push me into, to the chair at the head of the table. If you've ever been underestimated, sidelined, or silenced, this story is for you. Because they wanted me gone. And instead, I became the woman they'd never forget. Truly, thank you for being here. Whether you've followed my journey from the first quiet moment to the final boardroom vote, or you're just now stepping into this world I built from the ashes, I'm grateful you showed up. Every comment, every reflection, every moment you spend inside this story means more than you know. This wasn't just a story about power or revenge, it was about resilience. About what happens when you're underestimated, overlooked, and still choose to rise. If you've ever been in that position, I hope you see yourself somewhere in these pages. And if you haven't yet, I hope this reminds you what's possible when you stop waiting to be chosen, and start choosing yourself. Now it's your turn. Scroll up, take a breath, and dive in. Start from the moment they tried to erase me. Follow the cracks, the silence, the fire, and the rebuild. Feel what I felt. Watch how it turns. And when you're done, come back. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you would have done. Because your voice matters here too. Let's get into it. I had given my everything to Hollow and Bright, a marketing firm run by my husband's family. Late nights buried in campaigns, countless vendor calls, brainstorming until sunrise. For me, it wasn't just a job. It was a promise. When I married Adrian, I vowed to show his family I wasn't just another outsider. So when he and his sister Lydia called me into the downtown office one Thursday in 2023, I thought it was to review the expansion into the Asian market. I walked in, tablet in hand, numbers ready. But the energy was off. Adrian sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes distant. Lydia lounged at the head of the table, her smirk smug and victorious. "Serena," she began crisply, "we're letting you go." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She tilted her head. "We don't need anyone slowing the company down." Slowing it down? I'd just closed a 6-figure contract 2 nights ago while she botched our supplier budget. I looked at Adrian, silently begging him to speak. To defend me. But he just stared at the polished table. Nothing. My throat burned, but I didn't flinch. I stood straighter, nodded, and said, "All right. Good luck." Then I turned and walked out. The elevator ride down felt longer than the 8 years I'd given them. By the time I got to my condo in Chicago's West Loop, I felt hollow. I dropped my bag, sat on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. How could he? After everything? I'd rebuilt their client acquisition strategy when it crashed in 2020. I'd saved their brand during the data breach in 2021. I'd held his hand when his father, Malcolm, passed and left him the company reins. My phone buzzed. It was Nia, our longtime financial analyst. "Heard what happened. I don't think they reviewed your equity clause." My fingers tightened around the phone. My equity clause? I hadn't thought about that in years, back when Malcolm still trusted me. I shot back, "What's in it?" No reply came, but my heart was already racing. I pulled out a dusty folder from my home office cabinet, one marked HB Legal, 2020 M&A. Malcolm had insisted on listing me as co-owner of a small digital content firm we'd acquired that year. I flipped to the final clause. There it was. My name. Co-director of Hollow and Bright Digital Holdings. With exclusive licensing rights to the very tools the company now depended on, ad software, client templates, proprietary data. Without my signature, they couldn't even run campaigns. My pulse steadied. They thought they'd fired me. But they'd only cut off their own oxygen. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Malcolm's old partner, Denise. Her voice was low, urgent. They really fired you? Yes, I said. She paused. Then they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I smiled, not the polite kind. The real kind. Let them think I'm gone. Let them feel it when the system grinds to a halt. This isn't the end. This is my beginning. Yet last night, Adrian hadn't even looked at me. I sipped my water, but the chill did nothing to cool the fire crawling out my chest. Had this been his idea all along? Or had Lydia finally pushed hard enough to make him fold? I didn't know which version cut deeper, the betrayal or the cowardice. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Nia. Check the merger clause from the Prism acquisition. You're still locked in. My fingers tightened around the glass. The Prism deal. That was 5 years ago, back when Malcolm was still alive and Hollow and Bright had just started dipping its toes into proprietary ad tech. We'd acquired Prism Digital to own the software that powered most of our client campaigns. I had negotiated every line of that deal while Malcolm called me his fixer. A merger clause. I set the glass down with a quiet clink and rubbed my temples, feeling the first stirrings of something beneath the haze, hope, or maybe vengeance. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. I rushed to the filing cabinet in my office. Dust coated the old folders, most of them untouched since Malcolm's funeral. The one I wanted was near the back, Prism Merger, 2018. Yellowed tabs, a coffee stain on the corner, but still intact. I flipped through page after page until my eyes landed on the heading, Leadership Continuity Agreement, Section 17. And there it was. In print. My name, Serena T. Rivera, co-chairperson, Prism Digital Holdings, with irrevocable authority over its licensing, assets, and IP decisions. My pulse thudded like a war drum. Prism wasn't just a name, it was the engine under Hollow and Bright's hood. They couldn't launch a campaign, secure a client, or pitch new work without accessing Prism's software. And I still held the keys. They hadn't fired me. They'd just forgotten they couldn't. I leaned back, letting the gravity of the moment settle. They'd booted me out of the boardroom, but they left the vault wide open. I texted Nia, found it. She replied instantly. Sit tight. Let them scramble. The weight of the day shifted, no longer crushing but strangely buoyant. They thought they'd buried me. Instead, they'd given me a shovel. And I knew exactly where to dig. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of our condo, but Adrian's side of the bed was still cold. He hadn't come home. My phone rang, sharp and sudden. The screen lit up, Malcolm's cell, legacy line. I stared at it. My thumb hovered. What did they want? A warning? An apology? Curiosity clawed harder than pride, so I answered. Hello? Serena, came the booming voice of Malcolm's longtime business partner, Eliza Duval. Why the hell did they fire you? Didn't those idiots read the contract? I went still. Eliza didn't know. She hadn't been in that boardroom. She hadn't seen Lydia's smug smile or Adrian's silence. I cleared my throat. Guess they missed the fine print. Eliza exhaled sharply. Then they've got no idea what's about to hit them. And in that moment, I realized, I wasn't just back in the game. I was holding all the cards. I let the question hang in the air, unsure whether answering was even worth it. I don't know, Eliza, I said at last, keeping my voice even. You'd have to ask them. She muttered something under her breath, something about those kids ruining everything, but I barely heard it. My thoughts were already racing, zeroed in on the clause Nia had uncovered. The one buried in the Prism digital acquisition files. The one no one remembered, except me. Eliza's anger wasn't just heat, it was pressure, the kind that builds right before the dam breaks. And I had a feeling I was standing at the floodgate. I swung my legs off the bed and made my way to the kitchen, the phone still warm in my palm. Without Adrian's early morning clatter or the sound of him rambling on about client metrics, the condo felt cavernous. Empty in a way that had nothing to do with space. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, letting the scent fill the silence. As it dripped, Eliza's words circled back. Haven't they read the damn contract? She hadn't sounded angry. She'd sounded afraid. I poured a cup and sat at the small table by the window, watching a haze of clouds gather over the city skyline. Yesterday, they blindsided me, Adrian with his silence, Lydia with that victorious smirk. I'd walked out of that boardroom like I didn't matter. But today? Today, I saw the cracks forming. And they didn't. That merger clause from the Prism deal wasn't a dusty technicality, it was the foundation. I was still listed as co-chair of the IP holding company. And with it, I had control over all the licensing that powered Hollow and Bright's most profitable campaigns. No contract. No launch. No profits. The bitterness of the coffee matched the taste of betrayal in my mouth. They hadn't just pushed me out, they tried to erase me. But I wasn't gone. I was the piece they didn't know they still needed. My phone buzzed again. A text from Nia. Eliza just called me. She's panicking. Said Lydia really screwed up. I smirked, thumbs already moving. She called me first. She's asking about the IP terms, Nia replied. She's worried. Big time. Especially about the patents. Of course, the patents. Hollow and Bright wasn't a name, it was an engine powered by tech we'd tucked under Prism during the acquisition. Smart, scalable, and locked in tight under that clause. Without my sign-off, they had no access. They couldn't pitch, couldn't build, couldn't even renew existing client contracts. I set the phone down and leaned back, my hands wrapped around the warmth of the mug. Just yesterday, I was discarded, thrown out like an intern who overstayed her usefulness. But now? Now I was the firewall. Eliza's call hadn't been a courtesy, it was a flare. A warning. Lydia and Adrian didn't know what they'd just triggered. But they would. Soon. I stood up, pacing across the polished floors, the city moving slowly outside the window. What if they brought in legal firepower? What if they fought dirty? I didn't have all the answers, but I trusted Nia. I trusted Eliza. And I trusted the paper trail Malcolm left behind. Out the window, a delivery truck rumbled down the block. Life outside kept moving. But in here? The real storm was about to start. And this time, I wasn't the one caught in the middle. I was the one holding the fuse. I'd weathered Adrian's cold spells. I'd bitten my tongue through Lydia's backhanded remarks and her jabs disguised as business strategy. I kept things steady, balanced, even when it meant sacrificing myself for the sake of peace. But steady didn't count for anything now. They'd pushed me out. And soon, they'd realize what that really cost them. My phone rang again. Eliza. Round 2. I was ready this time. Serena, she said, her voice softer now, like she'd burned through the worst of her fury. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd be foolish enough to actually cut you loose. I nodded, more to myself than her. It's done. But tell me, what's in that contract that's got you so worked up? She let out a dry, humorless laugh. You're still co-chair of Prism Holdings. The words hung between us like smoke. They can't operate without you, she added. They literally can't touch the IP without your signature. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. It was all starting to settle in now, heavy and real. They'd fired me like I was expendable. But the only thing they'd actually done was lock themselves out of the engine that kept their golden machine running. Late afternoon sunlight spilled through the living room windows as my phone buzzed again. Nia. They're in a meeting with the lawyers. Just read the contract. I pictured the scene vividly, Lydia pacing with that sharp click of her heels, her nerves bleeding into sarcasm. Adrian probably standing behind her, trying to look composed, but panicking inside. And that long oak conference table, stacked with folders and espresso cups, and now, a legal document that felt like a noose. They'd just realized they couldn't move without me. I glanced down at the printed contract spread across the coffee table. Page 17, highlighted in yellow from a time when I still kept office supplies and a cheerful organizer. Serena T. Rivera, co-chairperson, with full authority over subsidiary assets, operations, and licensing. There it was. In plain ink. Signed, sealed, and time-stamped. I remembered the day it became official. Eliza had clapped me on the back at the closing dinner, smiling as she raised her glass of bourbon. "You've earned every line of that contract," she'd said. At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. I was too focused on growing the company, too trusting of Adrian and his family to imagine a day when they'd try to erase me. But they never read the fine print. Last month, they'd celebrated their so-called takeover, Lydia grinning in her power suits, Adrian quoting books about vision and legacy. They thought they were in control. Thought they could clear the board and start fresh. But they'd forgotten I helped build the game. Now, I imagine Lydia's face, pale and tight. That slight tremble in her lip when she's cornered. And Adrian, silent, probably turning red at the neck like he always did when he knew he was wrong. They'd tossed me out like a liability. But I was the asset they never saw coming. They'd flown in some high-priced attorney from New York, Noelle Hart, corporate cleanup legend. I'd met her once, during a hollow and bright leadership summit. Slick ponytail, suit sharp enough to cut glass, and a handshake like a silent dare. She didn't make small talk. She made power moves. If anyone was going to try and unravel the mess Lydia and Adrian had made, it would be her. And I imagined her voice now, flat, calm, and brutal, laying it out for them. "You're screwed." I stood, the couch too still, too suffocating. The quiet in the condo only made the silence heavier. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of IPA from the fridge, and cracked it open. The hiss of the cap breaking was the loudest sound in the room. What were they doing right now? Flipping through legal binders? Shouting? Blaming Noelle? I could practically hear Lydia snapping, "How did we miss this?" And Adrian murmuring something useless while rubbing the back of his neck, his nerve as hell. They'd made a spectacle out of firing me. Public, cold, final. But they had no idea they'd just sabotaged themselves. Without my signature, they couldn't move a single dollar tied to Prism Holdings. Couldn't renew a single license for our flagship software. Couldn't even release a new campaign. It was all frozen, wrapped in the airtight contract Malcolm and I had put together 5 years ago. And I was the only one with the key. I leaned against the counter and took a long pull from the bottle. The cold ran down my throat and hit my chest like clarity. I was still angry, sure. But underneath that anger, a darker thrill had taken root. They'd embarrassed me, cut me out like I was disposable. Now they were trapped. And they knew it. Back on the couch, I picked up my phone and scrolled through old texts from Adrian. Just a week ago, he messaged, "Home by 7. Let's do ramen or pizza." Normal. Casual. Like we were still us. Now he couldn't even face me. I tossed the phone aside. The contract sat on the coffee table, page 17 marked with a sticky note. I ran my hand over the edge of the paper like it might reveal the next step. What would they do next? Try to sweet-talk me into signing? Threaten legal action? Noelle struck me as the type to spin the law into whatever shape suited her. But she hadn't met Malcolm. He wrote this contract to be bulletproof. And now it was their cage. The board would find out soon. Then the investors. Then the clients. The questions would come like waves. And Lydia wouldn't have answers. Adrian wouldn't have the authority. And I would have options. My phone buzzed again, Nia this time. Noelle's panicking. Says without your sign off, the company's dead in the water. I smiled. Dead in the water. That sounded just right. They'd built their empire on confidence and short memory. But I was the current they forgot to measure. And I wasn't done rising. Not yet. After that, I went completely silent. No matter how many messages came through, no matter how desperate they got, I refused to play their game. The day after Nia's update about Noelle losing it, my inbox started lighting up. First, an email from Lydia. Short. Abrasive. Like she still believed she had the upper hand. Serena, we need to discuss your exit terms. Call me. Exit terms? I almost laughed. She still thought this was hers to manage, like I was just a name to clean off a whiteboard. I didn't bother replying. Then came a text from Adrian. Different tone, measured, cautious. Like he'd practiced it a dozen times before hitting send. Can we talk? This got out of hand. Out of hand? He had sat there in that boardroom like a stranger while his sister called me deadweight and showed me the door. And now he wanted to talk? I stared at the screen for a full minute, thumb hovering. But no. They didn't deserve my words, not yet. If they were starting to sweat, good. Let them. I had the leverage now, and I wasn't giving it up just because they'd finally realized they weren't untouchable. I needed air. A moment away from it all. So I grabbed my keys and drove into the city, letting the familiar streets blur into memory. I didn't have a plan, just a need to move. My thoughts spun, the contract, Eliza's warning, Nia's updates. It was all circling, but I wasn't quite ready to strike. Not until I knew exactly how far the cracks had spread. I ended up pulling into a tiny cafe tucked behind a row of brownstones, Grind Theory, a place I used to hit for midday espresso runs with Geraldine, Malcolm's old assistant. She'd always treated me like family, even when the rest of them hadn't. On instinct, I called her. Serena, she answered, surprised but warm. I heard what those two did. You okay? I smiled, just a little. I'm fine. Still processing. What's it look like over there? I asked. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, honey, chaos. Total chaos. She painted the picture with that same dry humor I remembered, clients confused, projects stalled, vendors refusing to ship until approvals came in. Investors were circling like vultures, uneasy and irritated. Noelle was pacing the halls, lashing out, snapping at interns and execs alike. She's got bite, but no answers, Geraldine said. And Lydia? Phew. She's unraveling. I ordered a black coffee while she filled me in, the barista handing it over with a sympathetic smile, as if he somehow knew I was listening to something important. I found a corner booth and slid in, letting Geraldine's words sink in. Chaos. Good. They did this to themselves, thinking they could erase me and keep everything clean. Let them spiral. I'd be here, watching the empire they tried to steal come undone. And I wasn't done yet. I leaned back in the booth, eyes drifting toward the cafe window, the overcast sky outside casting a muted gray over the street. Adrian's text replayed in my mind, this got out of hand. Like it was an accident. Like he hadn't chosen to sit there and let it happen. I'd loved him once. Truly. In those early years, when we stayed up late dreaming on the living room floor, his fingers laced through mine, the future stretched out before us like fresh canvas. But now? He was a stranger. And I didn't know if I could ever want him back, not even if he begged. I took another sip of coffee. Bitter. Perfect. They could keep sending emails and texts like digital lifelines, but I wasn't biting. My phone buzzed again, another email. This one from Lydia. Longer this time. Drenched in that brittle politeness she only used when her confidence cracked. Serena, we're trying to resolve this amicably. Ignoring us isn't helping. Let's meet and sort this out. Amicably. As if humiliating me in front of the board had been a team-building exercise. I deleted it without reading another word. Geraldine's voice echoed in my mind, clients panicking, suppliers stalling, investors looking for exits. They were drowning in a problem of their own making. And I owed them nothing. Sure, the contract gave me leverage. But it was my silence that was turning the screws. Every hour I ignored them, their panic grew. Every unanswered message drove home what they'd lost. I finished my coffee and stood, the mug warm in my hand. I stepped outside, the city breeze brushing my face, cool and clean. For the first time since that boardroom ambush, I felt grounded. Still. Like they were spinning, and I was stone. On the drive home, Geraldine's update replayed, Noelle scrambling, department heads whispering, morale slipping through the cracks. This wasn't just about paperwork or patents anymore. It was about trust. And they had none left. Not with clients. Not with partners. Not even with the team they'd inherited. And me? I didn't have to say a word. My silence said it all. I pulled into my driveway, the house waiting, quiet and still. I sat in the car for a moment, engine off, watching the wind shift the trees. No more messages. No new pleas. Maybe, finally, they were starting to get it. I wasn't their fixer anymore. I wasn't theirs at all. I stepped inside, the silence of the house mirroring the silence I'd weaponized. Let them figure it out. Let them crumble. I'd been quiet for days, letting Adrian and Lydia stew in the wreckage. But now, I was ready to speak. Not to them. Not yet. To the board. They'd been reaching out constantly, first courteous, then panicked. Begging for clarity. Cracks were showing. And I was ready to walk right through them. I could have let it all crash, watched from a distance as the empire crumbled under its own weight. But something in me wanted them to understand why. Not just that it was happening, but how and because they'd made it happen. So I sat at my desk, the original merger contract spread open like a map of buried treasure. And I wrote the email. No anger. No theatrics. Just the truth, calm, sharp, final. From Serena T. Rivera, co-chair of Prism Holdings. I outlined it clearly, the merger clause from 2018, my continued authority over all intellectual property, the fact that no trademark, patent, or licensing agreement could be moved without my signature. Not one campaign. Not one contract. I didn't ask for my job back. I didn't grovel. I ended it with one simple line. I'm asking for accountability, not reinstatement. Then I hit send, copied every board member, and leaned back in my chair. The weight I'd been carrying for days eased, just a little. They'd wanted me erased. Now they'd see what erasing me had cost. The condo was still quiet, Adrian's absence like a ghost that didn't quite know where to haunt. But today, I didn't mind the silence. It gave me space to think. I made myself a sandwich, just ham and cheese, nothing special, and let the stillness stretch while my phone remained dark. Too quiet. Which meant one thing, the board was scrambling, probably reading my email on repeat while trying not to look panicked. Half of them had been around when Malcolm and I were shaping the foundation of Hollow and Bright. They knew how deep my fingerprints went. The other half? Younger, hungrier, and too dazzled by Lydia and Adrian's polished power plays to notice the cracks beneath the surface. Now they'd be forced to choose. Let them. I took a bite, the bread dry and clinging to the roof of my mouth. I imagined Lydia pacing, Adrian deflecting, Noelle flipping pages looking for a miracle clause that didn't exist. By evening, my phone finally lit up again. A message from Nia. Boards in meltdown. Half want you reinstated. Half think Noelle can lawyer around it. I smirked. Let them try. That contract had been built with Malcolm's ruthless clarity. Not even Noelle's silver tongue could spin a new narrative. I stepped to the window, watching as the sun bled orange across the skyline. Another text followed from Nia. Rumor is the board's drafting a proposal, full control of Prism, excluding Adrian and Lydia completely. I didn't know how I felt about that yet. A part of me wanted it, control, recognition, revenge. A part of me still burned from Lydia's smirk and Adrian's silence. But deeper down, what I wanted more than anything was for them to look me in the eye and say it, we were wrong. That was the power I was after. And if they couldn't say it, then I'd take everything they thought they'd stolen and build something better. Without them. I went back to my desk, the half-eaten sandwich still sitting on the plate, and refreshed my email. Replies were starting to come in now, measured, cautious responses, like they were walking a tightrope. One in particular stood out. Tom Benton, one of Malcolm's old friends and a longtime board member, had written, "Serena, this is a mess. We didn't know about the clause. What do you want out of this?" I stared at it. What did I want? Yesterday, I'd been content watching them sweat. But now, with the board cracking in real time, possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine were forming. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. The entire company was paralyzed, deals stalled, suppliers holding orders, clients getting nervous. All because Adrian and Lydia had believed they could do this without me. My email hadn't just stirred the pot. It had upended the whole damn kitchen. I could hear it playing out in my mind, Lydia snapping, Adrian trying to mediate, Noelle flipping through contracts she thought she understood. The image almost made me smile. Almost. The night dragged on. I didn't sleep, just sat at the kitchen table, staring into the quiet hum of the fridge. Around midnight, Mia texted. Heard Eliza's pushing for a board meeting. Wants you there. I didn't respond. A meeting? It sounded like a setup. Get me in the room, wear me down, slide some papers across the table and hope I was tired enough to sign something that let them off easy. But if Eliza had rallied the old guard, if the board really was splitting, that was something else entirely. If I came back, it would be on my terms. Not theirs. I stood barefoot on the cold tile, a glass of water in my hand. They discarded me like I was an afterthought. Now I was the axis everything turned on. Let them fight. Let them burn through legal fees and nervous sweat. I wasn't in a rush. I was halfway through making coffee when my phone buzzed, Adrian's name lighting up the screen. I froze. He hadn't called since the boardroom. Just those soft, guilt-soaked texts I'd ignored. I stared at the screen for a beat too long. Then I answered. Yeah. A pause. Then his voice came through, quiet and frayed at the edges. Serena, can we meet? Please. I didn't speak at first. I let the silence hang, heavy and sharp. Meet, after all that? Still, I heard it in his tone, the fray beneath his calm, the crack forming in his pride. Why? I asked, my voice flat. He sighed, shaky. This whole thing, it's a misunderstanding. I want to fix it. A misunderstanding. I almost laughed. But I didn't. Fine, I said. Noon. That cafe on 5th. Let's see what he really wanted to fix. He agreed quickly, almost too quickly, like he was afraid I'd change my mind, and hung up. I set the phone down on the counter, the smell of fresh coffee swirling in the air, wondering what angle he'd try to play. I got to the cafe early. It was one of those small, cozy spots we used to slip into back when we still liked each other, wooden booths, soft lighting, the kind of place that used to feel warm and familiar. Now, it felt like a stage. Like I was waiting for a performance I didn't ask to see. I picked the corner booth and sat with my water, watching the door. Adrian walked in right on time, coat pulled tight, face pale, eyes heavier than I remembered. He spotted me, gave a half-smile, the kind that died before it ever reached his eyes, and slid into the seat across from me. Hey, he said, trying to keep it casual, like this was just two old friends catching up. I nodded once. My face didn't move. Hey. He fiddled with his napkin, like he wasn't sure how to begin. Then he leaned forward, Just a little. Serena, I'm sorry about how this all played out. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I raised a brow. I didn't say a word. He kept going, words spilling faster now. Lydia pushed for it, and look, I didn't know how to stop it. But we can work this out, can't we? You don't have to freeze the contracts. We need those deals moving again. I sat still, hand resting calmly on the table, letting him speak. I'd heard that voice before, soft, careful, calculated. The same tone he used when he was trying to make a bad thing seem like a small mistake. The waiter came by. Adrian ordered a salad he wouldn't eat. I ordered a burger, because I wasn't here to impress anyone. Once the waiter left, Adrian tried again. The company's a mess, Serena. Without your sign-off, everything's stalled. Let's just fix this. Move forward. I took a sip of water, slow, deliberate. Then I spoke. A mess, huh? Imagine that. He blinked, thrown off by my calm, but before he could jump in, I kept going. You didn't say a word when Lydia cut me loose. You just sat there. Now it's a misunderstanding? Color flushed his cheeks. He looked down, toying with the napkin. I didn't want it to go that way, he mumbled. Lydia said we needed a clean break. Noel agreed. His voice trailed off. Even he knew how hollow it sounded. I leaned in, voice low. You thought what? That I'd just walk away quietly. Before he could answer, the food arrived. I took a bite of the burger, calm and steady, while he pushed at his salad like it had betrayed him. He glanced up again. It was Lydia. She pushed it hardest. Of course she did. He convinced me it was best for the company, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. Noel assured us it was legal. I set my burger down slowly, my appetite fading. Noel's wrong, I said flatly. And Lydia doesn't get to hide behind lawyers or corporate spin. You both signed off on it. Together. His eyes widened, like he hadn't expected me to push back so hard. Maybe he still thought I'd be the quiet one, the one who smoothed things over. Serena, please, he said, voice cracking. We can fix this. Just sign off on the IP licensing. We'll figure something out for you, some kind of role. A role. Like I was a wayward intern they didn't want to fully fire. Like they were offering scraps and calling it compromise. I wiped my hands on my napkin and looked him square in the eye. You fired me like I was nothing, I said. Now deal with the consequences. He went still. Fork halfway to his mouth, then slowly set it down. You're really going to let the company fall apart? He asked, the words barely audible, like he couldn't believe this was happening. I shrugged, cool and deliberate. Not my call anymore, I said. You made that decision. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, like the version of me that would have forgiven him was gone, and it was. The charm wasn't working. The guilt had no weight left. I finished my burger while he picked at his salad, silence coiling between us like smoke. When the check came, I paid for mine and stood up. Good luck, I said, same as I'd said in that boardroom. Then I walked out. He didn't follow. I didn't look back. The next morning, his words still echoed in my mind, you're really going to let it fall apart? Like I was the wrecking ball, not him and Lydia with their power-hungry chess game. I rolled out of bed, sheets tangled around me from another restless night, and headed to the kitchen. The place felt a little emptier every day. But so did I, and I was starting to like the space. Coffee brewed, steam curling upward like a small exhale. I sat down at my desk and opened the contract again. No more waiting. They weren't going to fix this. So I would push. I drafted a notice, not to Adrian, not to Lydia, but to every client, supplier, and strategic partner tied to Hollow and Bright. Simple, direct. All licensing, campaigns, and deliverables tied to Prism Holdings were frozen until new terms were negotiated. No threats. No emotion. Just truth. I copied the entire board. Then I hit send. I leaned back in my chair, mug in hand. Let's see how they handled that. The house was quiet, the only noise the hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing by. Then, just after noon, the first call came, not from Adrian. Not from Lydia. From a client. And they were furious. The first call came from a guy named Paul, a partner at a tech firm we'd licensed some of Prism's proprietary designs to. His voice was tight, clipped. "Serena, what's happening? We can't get approvals. Our production line stalled." I kept my tone cool, professional. "I'm handling it, Paul. Sit tight, new terms are coming." He grumbled something about timelines but hung up. Then came another call. And another. Suppliers checking on shipment holds. Clients asking if they should delay marketing rollouts. Everyone nervous. I gave them all the same calm answer. "I'm on it. Things will clear up soon." What they didn't know was, I hadn't decided what soon actually meant. But I didn't need them panicked. Not yet. I just needed them waiting, while Adrian and Lydia scrambled. Midway through my fourth call, a text from Nia popped up. "Sales are tanking. Staff's jumping ship." I ended the call with a reassuring promise, then typed back, "Good." Though good didn't even come close. This was the moment I'd waited for. The moment they realized just how deep they'd cut themselves. I imagined Lydia pacing the office like a wildfire, shouting at every intern in sight. Adrian sitting at his desk, watching the sales dashboard nosedive, trying to breathe through it. They thought they could steer hollow and bright without me. Now desks were emptying. Clients were nervous. And I was the one everyone called. But one message stuck with me more than the rest. It wasn't from a client. It was from Harper, the lead strategist in our consumer engagement division. Someone sharp. Loyal. And wildly underappreciated. "Heard what's happening. If you're building something new, I'm in." I stared at the message for a long beat, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Something new? I hadn't let myself go there yet. Not really. But now, the thought clung to me. I typed back, "Appreciated. I'll keep you posted." And set the phone down. By evening, the fallout was unmistakable. Marco called just after sunset, his voice practically humming with urgency. "Serena, it's getting ugly over there. 2 sales execs walked out today, and one of our biggest clients just canceled a renewal. They're blaming Noelle, she's out." I blinked. "Noelle's gone?" "Yep," he said. "Lydia pinned it all on her, said the firing was her idea. She's cleaning out her office tonight." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the room dim and quiet. I should have felt bad. Almost did. But Noelle had played her part. And now she was just another casualty. I thanked Marco and hung up, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, and dropped into the couch. Hollow and Bright was coming apart, bit by bit, and all I'd done was tell the truth. The notice had done the rest. Clean. Precise. I took a long swig, the bitterness grounding me. Let them watch it burn. Adrian's face from the cafe flashed in my mind, tight, pale, desperate. Trying to charm his way out of a disaster he helped create. I hadn't heard from him since. Lydia, either. Maybe they were too busy blaming each other now. Or maybe, finally, they understood. I wasn't playing their game anymore. But Harper's text kept circling my thoughts like a whisper. Start something new. Could I? Could I really take the IP, the steady stream of clients reaching out, the staff who'd still follow me, and build something from the ashes? I leaned back into the couch, eyes tracing the ceiling. Letting the company collapse was one thing. But letting it die without a legacy? That wasn't enough. No, I wanted it to hurt first. I wanted them to feel what it was like to lose what they'd taken for granted. And then, when it all hit the ground, I'd rise, on my terms. I finished the beer and set the bottle on the coffee table. The silence settled around me again, heavier than usual. They'd feel this tomorrow. And the next day. And the one after that. And when the dust cleared, I'd still be standing. I was halfway through breakfast the next morning, scrambled eggs and toast, when my phone lit up. Eliza Duval. I wiped my hands on a napkin and answered, keeping my voice calm. Hey, Eliza. You didn't waste time. Her voice came through sharp and no nonsense. Serena, we've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I didn't say anything, waiting. I need you there, not as an employee. As executive chair of Prism Holdings, she added. Can you do that? I paused, fork hovering over my plate. Executive chair. Not an invitation back into the machine. Not a gesture of pity. This was a seat above Adrian and Lydia. With real power. I set the fork down. My thoughts shifted gears. What's the deal? She exhaled, a deep tired breath. The company's hemorrhaging. Clients are gone, staff's walking, and the board's had it with their mess. We're voting on new terms, Lydia out of client operations. Adrian demoted to COO. You in? I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. It was more than I expected. More than I even knew I wanted. Yeah, I said. I'm in. But it's happening on my terms. Eliza let out a short, rough laugh. Good. See you tomorrow. She hung up, and I sat there, eggs growing cold on the plate, feeling everything shift beneath me. The rest of the day, I kept busy, scrubbed the kitchen, watered the plants, anything to stay moving while my brain caught up. Eliza wasn't just handing me leverage. She was handing me the reins. Lydia would be sidelined. Adrian would answer to me. And I'd be signing off on everything. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was getting close. I headed back inside, poured myself a glass of water, and checked my phone. A message from Nia lit up the screen. Board's buzzing. Eliza's pushing hard for you. I typed back quickly, she called. I'm in tomorrow. Her response came back in seconds. Hell yes. They're done. I set the phone down and took a long, steadying sip. Done? Maybe. But I wasn't here just to watch Hollow and Bright fall apart. I was here to build something better from the wreckage. The next morning, I arrived at the office right at 9 a.m., sharp and composed. I wore a dark slate suit, blazer buttoned, hairpin clean, sharp enough to cut through the tension I knew would be waiting for me. The boardroom didn't feel like a place I'd been forced out of anymore. It felt like mine. As I stepped in, eyes turned. Some were surprised, others, relieved. Eliza sat at the head of the table, her posture tight, a small nod acknowledging me. Adrian was across the room, jaw clenched, hands in his lap. Lydia sat beside him, arms folded, her glare trained on me like she wanted to set the table on fire. I took the seat Eliza indicated, just to her right. She didn't waste time. We're here because Hollow and Bright is bleeding out, she said, her voice slicing through the quiet. Serena's notice locked the IP, and operations are frozen. We need to act. She turned toward the room. I'm proposing Serena return, not as an employee, but as executive chair of Prism Holdings, with full decision-making authority. Lydia is removed from client operations. Adrian steps down to COO. We vote now. There was a heartbeat of hesitation. Then Eliza's allies raised their hands, first in a wave, then the rest followed. The motion passed. Quick. Clean. Lydia shoved back her chair and stormed out, the glass door slamming shut behind her. Adrian didn't move. Just stared at the table like the numbers written there might change. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Eliza reviewed the damage, lost deals, vacant roles, rattled investors. Then she turned to me. My voice was steady. I'll lift the freeze once we have revised terms in place. I'm not here to destroy this company. I'm here to fix what you broke. A few heads nodded, even the ones who had doubted me last week. Adrian finally looked up. Our eyes met for a second, then he looked away. He knew it was over. The takeover. The games. Lydia's plans. The meeting ended. People filtered out. Eliza clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Welcome back," she said. I nodded. But this wasn't back. This was new. And it was mine. Adrian lingered, like he wanted to speak. I didn't give him the chance. I walked out, leaving the boardroom behind. The morning air was crisp. The sun was rising. And for the first time in weeks, I felt solid. Back at home, I sat at my desk. The contract still lay open. The vote was done. But the real work was just beginning. But first, I needed terms, real ones. Rules that locked Adrian and Lydia in place, kept the company from ever being twisted into a vanity project again. I grabbed a notepad and started scribbling. Lydia was out of the spotlight now, and Adrian? He'd have to get used to reporting to me. I smirked, picturing him sitting across from me in meetings, trying to keep that carefully curated calm. This wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of something sharper, smarter. And I was more than ready. The next morning, I woke up clear-headed, the board's decision still fresh in my mind. Light crept through the blinds as I brewed coffee, the machine hissing like it was cheering me on. Executive chair. The words echoed, firm and grounding. They had tried to erase me. Now I stood above them. I took my mug to my desk. The contract was still there like a monument to everything I'd fought for. The company was in shambles, staff turnover, client departures, budgets in freefall. But I wasn't interested in bandages. I was here to rebuild from the bones up. I opened my laptop and started laying it out, department by department. Merit-based hires. Accountability from the top down. No more inherited titles. No more favors. Adrian could stay as COO, but he'd answer to me. As for Lydia? An apology email had landed overnight. "Serena, I'm sorry. Let's talk." I didn't reply. She was done. I had more important things to do. First, I called Nia. She picked up fast, chipper. "Boss lady." I laughed into my coffee. "Heard you like a challenge. Born for it. You're my new CFO," I said. "Starting today. Get into the books, figure out what we can salvage." Her laugh was genuine. "Hell yes." Next, I texted Harper. "VP of Brand Strategy, still in?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Absolutely. I've got ideas already." That's what I needed. Not yes men. Not legacy hires. People who wanted to build something. By late morning, my sketch of the new Hollow and Bright was already coming together, leaner, smarter, and clean. No more blurred lines between family and function. No more whispers behind closed doors. This version was mine. By noon, I was back at the office. Not in my old glass cubicle, but in a corner space they'd cleared, big windows, clean walls, and a view of the skyline. A space that felt like possibility. Through the glass of an adjacent conference room, I spotted Adrian. He was sitting with a few team leads, posture tight, jaw set in that nervous clench I knew too well. He saw me. I didn't wave. Just watched for a beat. Let it sink in. This wasn't a return. This was a reset, with me at the center. And everything they thought they owned was now under my name. She looked up, saw me through the glass, and looked away just as fast, like holding my gaze was too much. Good. Let her feel it. I slid into my new chair, the space crisp and quiet, and opened my laptop. First things first, clients. I drafted emails short and to the point. IP access will resume shortly. New leadership. New terms. Stick with us. Replies came fast, some cautious, some flat out relieved. They'd wait. They believed in what was coming. Next, suppliers. Same approach, operations stabilizing. Shipments resume next week. Thanks for your patience. Their responses stacked up, measured, but hopeful. This wasn't about power for the sake of it. It was about using it right. By mid-afternoon, I called our first official meeting. Marco. Harper. A few others I'd pulled from the rubble, loyal, brilliant people who still had fire in them. Adrian had to be there too, part of his new role as COO. He showed up last, heels clicking across the polished floor, face composed but tense. He slid into the seat across from me, eyes lowered, hands folded. I didn't waste a second. We're restructuring, I said, handing out printouts. Merit-based hires only. No more legacy appointments. No more shortcuts. Marco was officially in as CFO. Harper, VP of Brand Strategy. Adrian? Daily Ops, reporting directly to me. He gave a single nod. Short. Stiff. No argument. Marco grinned, already flipping through the numbers. Harper leaned in, her mind racing with campaigns and recovery timelines. The meeting carried us into late afternoon, budget triage, rebranding concepts, streamlining internal comms. It felt real. Like we were building something that could breathe again. Adrian spoke when he had to, voice controlled, taking notes like he was memorizing his place. He knew. Every decision passed through me now. When the others filtered out, Marco gave me a solid pat on the back. This is strong, Serena. You've got it. I nodded, collecting the papers. Just keep our numbers clean. He left. Adrian stayed. I could feel him hovering at the edge of the room, like he wanted to say something. Eventually, he walked over, eyes hard. This how it's going to be? He asked quietly. You calling every shot? I met his gaze, calm and steady. You wanted me out. This is what you get instead. His jaw tightened. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out. I didn't stop him. He'd stay in line, or lose everything else. I wrapped up late. The sky was dark by the time I pulled into my driveway. Radio off. Just my thoughts. The company was turning. Fresh voices. Real structure. Me at the helm. Earlier, I'd called Geraldine, offered her a generous retirement package. She cried. Told me I was the best of them. Maybe I was. The house was quiet when I stepped in. But it didn't feel hollow anymore. This wasn't about revenge now. It was about building something they'd never break again. I'd keep Adrian on a leash, ignore Lydia's hollow apologies, and rebuild this thing my way. Tomorrow, it would begin again, stronger, cleaner, better than they ever imagined. I woke early. The house was still wrapped in that deep, pre-dawn quiet. But inside, I felt something different. Not nerves. Not fire. Something solid. Like earth after a long, brutal storm. It had been months since the boardroom shift, since I stepped in as executive chair and reclaimed what they tried to erase. Now, hollow and bright was breathing again. I brewed my coffee, the familiar hiss and drip filling the kitchen, and stood still for a moment, taking it in. Clients had returned, loyal and steady. Each contract I signed, each call I made, rebuilt the trust Adrian and Lydia had shattered. Investors followed, money flowing back in once the metrics turned. Adrian kept his distance, doing his job as COO without a word of pushback. Quiet. Precise. Subdued. Lydia? Gone. Her apology email still sat unread in my inbox. I didn't need her remorse. Today wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about protecting what I'd built. About making sure no one else got erased like I had. At my desk, the original contract still rested to the side like a familiar artifact. I opened a new document and began drafting the final piece, a set of revised bylaws. Rules for fairness. Safeguards against politics. and a clause that tied Hollow and Bright's IP rights to leadership based on merit, not bloodline. The office was buzzing when I arrived, the energy sharp and alive. Real momentum. People who wanted to be there. Marco waved me over with his usual grin. "Numbers are looking fantastic," he said, sliding over the latest report. "Best quarter in 5 years." I scanned the charts: growth, retention, low overhead. "Good work," I told him. And I meant it. He'd earned every line on that page. Harper's new branding strategy had done wonders, too: polished, bold, targeted. We'd landed clients who wouldn't have returned our calls a year ago. No more dynasty. No more loyalty based on last names. Just talent, grit, and execution. Adrian's office door stayed shut. He sent in daily reports on time, no fluff, no delays. Just numbers. It was the only relationship we still had, and I was fine with that. By mid-morning, I gathered a small group: Marco, Harper, 2 board reps Eliza had handpicked. Adrian had to be there, too. He slipped into the conference room, his chair squeaking as he sat across from me. I passed out copies of the new bylaws. "This protects all of us," I said. "No more backdoor moves. No more purges. The IP stays with the company, but only under leadership that earns it." Marco nodded, scanning. "Smart. Locks it airtight." Harper smiled. "Clients will love the transparency." One board member took notes furiously. The other said, "Eliza's all in." Adrian sat quietly, fingers tapping once, twice, then stopped. He knew what this meant. The era of guessing who held the power was over. Now it was written in ink. I didn't look at Adrian for long, just long enough to see his jaw tighten, then ease. He understood. This locked him in place, stripped away any path back to power. Good. The vote passed fast. Unanimous. I signed the bylaws then and there, the pen feeling heavier than I expected. It was done. After the meeting, I did what had become routine: walked the floor. Not to monitor, but to connect. It kept me grounded. Staff looked up when I passed, not with the stiff politeness they used to give Lydia or Adrian, but with something real. Trust. One of the newer hires stopped me near the design hub. "Thanks for this, Serena," he said, a little shy. "It feels different here." I smiled, clapping his shoulder. "That's the point," I said, and kept moving. The office thrummed with life, phones ringing, deals closing, people actually invested in the work. Weeks after the board vote, I'd unfrozen the IP myself, renegotiated every contract line by line, and watched the pieces snap back into place. Suppliers resumed shipments. Investors called me, not some middleman. The company was thriving, not because of a legacy name or corporate posturing, but because I made it happen. I paused at the window, looking down at the street below, the sun high and steady. This wasn't just survival. It was mine now. Evening crept in. Most of the staff cleared out, but I stayed late, answering client emails, updating the board, writing thank yous by hand. Clarissa's office was dark when I passed it. She'd left quietly, as she often did now. The quiet didn't bother me. It gave me space to think. The new bylaws were filed. The legacy clause was locked in. No one would be erased without cause again. I leaned back, my desk lamp casting a warm halo across the glass surface, and smiled, not the tight, practiced one I wore the day they fired me, but something softer, more certain. This hadn't been about revenge in the end. Yes, Adrian had been silenced. Lydia pushed out. That part felt necessary. But this, rebuilding it right, meant more. I shut down my computer, shrugged into my coat, and stepped into the quiet corridor. Driving home, the city lights washed across my windshield, but I didn't feel the weight anymore. The house would be quiet. And that was okay. I'd rewritten the rules. And tomorrow? I'd keep building. Letting the world remember exactly who held it together. If you've been with me through this story, through the silence, the betrayal, the fight, and the rebuild, then you already know, this was never just about revenge. This was about reclaiming dignity. About showing up for yourself when no one else does. If anything I've lived through struck a chord with you, I want to hear it. I want to know if you've ever felt tossed aside, underestimated, or silenced. Because I have. And I'm still here. So leave a comment. Tell me where you've been. Tell me what you've built, or what you're trying to. Remind yourself, and me, that power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's the woman sitting in the boardroom they tried to lock her out of, now running the entire table. I didn't just survive what they did to me. I rewrote the terms. And if you're still trying to find your voice, I'm here to tell you, you can. Don't wait for permission to take up space. And here's what I'll leave you with: know your worth before they try to question it. Document it. Protect it. Trust it. Whether it's in business, in family, in love, you deserve a seat at the table you helped build. And if they try to take it from you, make a better one. Invite people who see you. People who believe in you. The ones who'd never make you prove yourself twice. This story isn't over. But the version of me who was silent in that boardroom, she's gone. And if you're reading this, maybe it's time to say goodbye to your version too. Support the builders. The rebuilders. The ones who rise without needing to destroy. I'd love to know you're one of them. Leave your words. I'll be reading.